Today we're going to talk about two main things. We're going to talk about food security, and we're also going to talk about inflation. We're going to look at what the World Economic Forum, that's the group who tells you in just a few short years you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. We're going to look at their own website, and they're going to tell us what countries and what places on earth they believe are going to have high levels of inflation and trouble acquiring food. Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead, and you want to hang on to the end because this is not to scare you. There is some serious hope that we're going to have at the end of this message, so don't miss out on that. Even the President of the United States, you may have seen this video right here, you can look it up, where Biden tells us to expect real food shortages due to the Ukrainian war. Now, we've already seen some kinds of food shortages, specifically for baby formula, and that I don't think is what the president was talking about. There's other reasons for that. Supply chain issues, shutting down a factory in Michigan that was one of the big pushers of baby formula, and when they shut that down, well, there just simply didn't seem to be enough to go around. But that's not mainly what we're talking about here. I want you to notice this. This is from Insider talking about Ukraine's biggest food producer says the global food crisis could spell catastrophe and impact hundreds of millions of people. This is something to really consider, that obviously war is one of the factors that is causing the difficulties with inflation and food security in certain different regions. But there's some other issues also to think about. This article here from Agricultural News, or Agri News specifically, is Farm and Food File New Signs of Apocalypse, War, Famine, and Davos Man. Now, Davos Man, those are, once again, that goes back to the World Economic Forum. It's fascinating when you look at the news right now. I mean, historically, you go back a few years and people didn't talk about, they didn't use kind of end time words in their news briefs. You didn't hear about the apocalypse and these kinds of things. But because so many things are taking place on Earth right now, even secular periodicals are using terminology that really has kind of a last day import to it. To get an idea of how much the prices have gone up, the inflation has gone up in these various sectors, this is a phenomenal article right here from Reuters. And just to give you a little idea, this is a chart on certain food commodities from 2018 to 2022. And you look at something like sugar, the price of sugar going up 21.8%. Now, nobody really thinks that refined sugar is a healthy food, so I'm not promoting that at all, but we're just looking. You can imagine if the price of sugar has gone up, then all the foods that contain refined sugar are also going to go up. We go even further and we look at meat is gone up about the same as sugar, so surprisingly, partly because it's subsidized so heavily by the government that it hasn't gone up as far as some of the other things. And same, dairy has gone up more than twice of meat. That's fascinating. 48% increase from, like 2018 until 2022. This is incredible. And cereals, here we come into the grains, and grains are up 69, nearly 70%. I mean, this is incredible to think about. That one of the most important foodstuffs on planet Earth, grains have gone up significantly. I mean, we're talking nearly 70%. So you can imagine in nations where the staple foods come from things like bread and so forth, that these countries, especially when they're poor countries, now wealthier countries, they're going to get by, most of them, at least for some time, they'll be perfectly fine. They'll just have to pay more at the supermarket. I don't mean perfectly fine. I mean, that's annoying to pay more. It is for any of us. But these very poor countries where people might spend a good chunk of their income on food, this is where it can have a catastrophic impact on these people's lives. But going even further, this one is amazing. Oils. The price of oils has gone up by 137%. And I'm going to let you know that's one way to save money is don't buy oil. If you need to, you can cook. My wife and I, we actually, if we fry something, we fry it in water. You can do it, you just have to keep adding water. And I'm not saying you can't buy it. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying if you're looking to save some money, one of the ways is to avoid cooking with oil, because really cooking oils are not really a great health food for you. They simply are cause calories and weight, but they're really not primary drivers of nutrition in general. But the food index price overall is nearly 60% increase over this time period, so up 58.5%. But now I want to get into specifically, what does the World Economic Forum, the ones who tell us about the Great Reset that is coming, or they're even seeking to have, And what do they say? Who's going to struggle with this? Notice here, taken directly from the World Economic Forum's official website, nations must act together urgently and with solidarity to end the food insecurity crisis, according to the United Nations. Now, this just happens to be an article from the World Economic Forum, and so they're saying nations need to work together, and obviously to some degree it does help nations, because certain areas, certain sectors of the world, like Russia and Ukraine, who were some of the great bread baskets of the world, they were exporters of grain, and so as their exports are being curtailed because of the war and because Russia may not be sending out as many things as before. So you can imagine it would be wise for other nations to come in to especially help the poorer countries who aren't able to grow enough grains and various food products to take care of themselves. Now that makes perfect sense, but these next charts from this next article from the World Economic Forum I find absolutely fascinating. From the horse's mouth, from Davos 2022, it tells us that tough times ahead for the global economy. And when we jump down here, they have these particular charts here, and this one here is the current financial situation. The question is asked, how well would you say you are managing financially these days? And so these are various countries, mainly the United States and Europe, and then they throw in Turkey. And you look at places like the US, you have a good chunk of people who are doing all right. The majority of people are doing okay, and some people in the blue are just getting by, and then the ones in the yellow, they're finding it quite difficult, and the ones who find it very difficult are 7%, and that is, a tough situation that they are in presently. You see the same thing with Germany, relatively close numbers in this situation, and you go through all of them, and these countries are doing okay, but then you jump down to something like Turkey at the bottom, and you're talking about a very small sector of society that is doing well, and there's some who are just getting by, but a total of less than 50% are doing okay. And then you get into that finding it very difficult. The majority, pushing two-thirds of people in this country are either finding it quite difficult or finding it very difficult, because Turkey has gone through some serious inflation. They have really struggled through this. But in this particular article, it goes on, and they have this chart here. Now, this is one that kind of brings it close to home, looking toward the future. The question is, at the top, where do chief economists expect high inflation and food insecurity? And so on the left side, anything in blue or bluish purple is to expect high inflation, and below that is food insecurity, that's the yellow, to expect food insecurity. Now when they look at the United States, they say 96% of this economic outlook is, yes, likely to have high inflation in the United States, but they say in this situation, okay, for the short-term future, there's a very low chance that people will be struggling without any food in the United States. Well, obviously that sounds good for the United States. Now that day could come sometime, but presently they're saying, okay, we don't think there's going to be food insecurity in the United States at this time. But look at Latin America. Their specific high inflation, they're looking at 86%, they're saying, and 35% that they may have food insecurity. Europe, you're looking at 92% likelihood of high inflation and only 8% likelihood of having food insecurity. So obviously these nations like the United States and Europe, they're looking for inflation, but they figure, okay, people make enough money to maybe be able to deal with it. But then we look at a continent like Africa and portions of Africa. So you have Middle East and North Africa, 75%. They're expecting 75% chances of high inflation and 79% chances of expecting food insecurity. Then Sub-Saharan Africa, 67% chance of high inflation and 87% chance of food insecurity. And once again, this takes place as a result of the fact that we've had things like war that is increasing inflation, which is causing higher gas prices, which, by the way, the war did not create the higher gas prices. They went up. Most of the increases happened before the war. And one thing to think about that, people like it when we got free checks in the mail. They just said, oh, we're just going to put money in your account. That sounds great. So let's say you made a few $1,000s off that, and now we're spending $5,200 per family every year. So the money you made back then, now you're paying it all back. So you're paying back the debt that we took on that. So when we give money away, it actually creates higher prices in the future. So the more we give away, the higher prices will be in the future. Same thing when it comes to like college tuition. If we just give people all money back for going to college, we're likely to have massively higher inflation. Well, yeah, money is created from nothing. It is a fiat currency, but the trouble is when you give more money and print more money, the worth of that same currency becomes worth less until it becomes, as I've said before, worthless, right? And looking at China, you have a 25% chance of high inflation. So they're not as bad as most of the world, and about 25% chance of food insecurity. And places like South Asia, 61% and 52%, and East Asia and the Pacific, 39 and 30. This is going to initially impact the poorest people the worst, and it slowly works its way up the chain of society if the economy continued to descend, and I have no idea if it will. I hope that changing the interest rates is going to slowly over time curtail the inflation that's taking place in the United States, but I don't know if they'll be able to do it or not. I hope so. You say, Chad, are you trying to be a fear monger? Not at all. You say, Chad, you're talking about this. Someone in the comment section said, you know, you're real afraid. I'm not afraid. It's often, spiritually also, that you prepare for a future event. Well, in this case, it would be eternal life. And those who are prepared, they don't have to worry. They don't have to fear death. Same thing with many things in life. When you prepare for a test, those who study and prepare for the test are typically the least afraid when they come to the test. Sure, there's a little bit of trepidation and so forth when you get there. But when it comes to general preparation, and if we are coming upon those times, the Bible gives us some insight that difficult times are coming. War is coming, famine is coming, pestilence is coming, and some of it's already here, but it will get worse. And I'm going to share with you some information on that in a future video, but here's the point. Jesus tells us, do not be afraid. You don't have to be afraid. Even if you can't move to the country, God can take care of you wherever you are. But we can do little things to learn to prepare. I've talked about it before. You can grow some little pots outside your apartment in the city if you have a deck or a balcony or something like that. You can have a little herb garden or whatever it is, just to learn these experiences. And that might give you a taste to say, man, I want to have more of this. I'd like to have a little piece of ground where I could grow a garden and so forth. And I really believe that God is going to open doors for those who are willing in the last days. If you say, hey, God, I need you to open doors for me. I can't do it. I don't see how it could happen for me. I was that person, making very, very little money and living a very simple lifestyle, but God slowly opened the doors, and I believe He'll do the very same thing for you. It may take months, it may take years. Don't go ahead of Him, but allow Him to lead. And friends, remember, do not be afraid. Now, if you like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications. God bless, and have a fantastic day.